Hi, it's me, Ingrid INFP, and I'm making an MBTI video for the beginners. I'm not the best person to ask, but I do know a lot about MBTI, having been into MBTI for 15 years and having a YouTube channel about it. And I've never made a video for beginners because I'm not great at explaining this. It is quite complicated when you think about it. And if you don't have any exposure to it prior to like this video. Maybe you've seen other videos and just need another explanation, or you just want to watch my videos. That's also the case. But I have made a chart here to explain certain things. I might need to add things to the chart, but here we are. Most people go to 16 personalities and then they get the code of the MBTI, which is, in my case, an INFP. Introverted, intuition, feeling, perceiving. And these scales from introvert to extrovert, intuition to sensing, thinking to feeling, judging to perceiving. Now, I think that the 16 personalities has changed the judging to perceiving, and they call judging something else and perceiving something else. But I am a classic MBTI theorist, It's not like I am into all of these other offshoots. I sometimes borrow ideas from these offshoots sometimes, not always knowingly, but there's socionics, there's objective personality, there's CBT, there are all sorts of different things, but I'm following like the regular, bland standard MBTI. So these are the functions. Well, no, these are the code. This is the code, the 4-letter code that gives you this scale. So you're like 57% introvert and some percent extrovert, and on these 4 scales. But that's just the way that they make the test. That doesn't explain how the brain actually works to create these personality types. So if you want to dig deeper, you have to get into cognitive functions. Now, I've made these different colors. It is confusing. It's a lot, I know. But what you need to know is that the functions are either introverted or extroverted. So there's a introverted and extroverted version of each cognitive function. And the cognitive functions are from these 4 in the middle here: intuition, sensing, thinking, feeling. So you have introverted intuition, extroverted intuition, introverted sensing, extroverted sensing, introverted thinking, introverted feeling, extroverted feeling. Right? So these 4, but in their introverted and extroverted flavors. And then you have judging and perceiving, which kind of help us in the formation of the cognitive function stack that we use. So it decides in which order we're going to order these different functions. The introverted and extrovert also helps us know how to order these. But yeah. So you could say that the first letter and the last letter are used to for the shape, and the contents are from these 4 different variables. Now, if we leave this to get to this is where things get a little bit more tricky. Each cognitive function stack has 4 functions out of the possible 8. Okay, so I've created the function stacks of 2 different types, the INFP and the ENFJ, just to show a little bit how this could be created. I put the INFP in green here because it's a perceiving type, and I put the ENFJ in brown because it's a judging type. Okay. They're also different because they are extroverted and versus introverted. So the only thing that changes in these two types is the first and the last letters. But here we are. Also, to make things even more confusing, each cognitive function has its own code name, you know? It has its abbreviation. Because if we were sitting there saying introverted thinking, it's easier to just say FI for introverted feeling, or NE for extroverted intuition, right? And the codes are made by putting the first letter of these four, and the second letter is introverted or extroverted, so I or E. Anyway, here we are. We're trying to create the function stack of the ENFJ, let's just say, okay? The ENFJ is an extrovert, so their first function has to be extroverted. Now, if you know that the first function is going to be extroverted, the second function will be introverted, the third will be extroverted, and the fourth will be introverted again. So that's easy. You can just write those down. That's the way to know, so that's why we have the E, to know extroverted, introverted, extroverted, introverted. E-I-E-I. E-I-E-I-O. Anyway, the J is to say what the first function is or what the second function is. And so ENFJs are judgers, which does not mean that they're judgmental. It just means that judging is that you want closure, you want to make decisions, you want things to have a point, an end. Well, the INFP is a perceiver, so they are more open-ended. They like more to see how things go, and that doesn't mean that they're necessarily messy or that ENFJs are necessarily organized, but often when you like to leave things open-ended, it kind of gives you a perspective of the world that makes you less organized. But that's not at all the case in 100% of the cases, you know? So that's why we're trying to leave this surface world of codes to this more intricate, fascinating world of the cognitive functions. So for the ENFJ, let's go back to our example. Now, because ENFJs are a judger, their first function has to be a judging function. So, and a judging function in the MBTI system is thinking and feeling. Thinking and feeling are judging functions because they allow us to make decisions. Do we make decisions based on logical facts, cold logic, or do we make decisions based on feelings? Do we make them based on values, emotions, ethics, that kind of thing, which is the feeling kind of judging function. So the judging function in the ENFJ, because we already know that it's extroverted, and we know that in the code it's F, so it's extroverted feeling. FE is the shorthand for extroverted feeling. And when we know the first function, that's what's so nice, is that we know the last function. We know that the last function is the complete opposite of extroverted feeling, the complete opposite, both in terms of extroversion and introversion, and both in terms of thinking, feeling. So if the first function is extroverted feeling, FE, then the last function has to be introverted thinking, which is the total flip opposite. I mean, we all have to think, we all have to feel, we all have to have intuition, we all have to have sensing. Otherwise, we wouldn't function as human beings. It's just that this is about our preferences. This is how our brain prefers to work. If the ENFJ prefers to work with extroverted feeling and have introverted thinking is difficult for them. So that's where I call it, the first function is the driver, the dominant function that is preferred by the person. And the last one is called the inferior function or the baby function, the one that does not, is basically in the back seat and making chaos for everybody else, is not driving the car, thankfully, but is just like a thorn in your shoe that most of the time, but that you need to have there in order to create a perfect family, the family of the car. I forget if it's Personality Junkie that uses the car metaphor. Anyway, there's this car metaphor, which I find pretty good, is that we want to drive with our dominant function, which in the ENFJ's case is extroverted feeling, and we always need the opposite, which is the introverted thinking, but it's not the introverted thinking that's driving the car, right? Because they're just a baby, they're not developed yet. Which the primary function, the dominant function, driver function, is the mature one. That's, if you've seen Inside Out, the, joy in Inside Out is like the primary driver function, I forgot to write, but primary is a function that is also a word that you could use here instead of dominant or driver. And then, so now we have the first function and the last function. In the middle, you need to have introverted and extroverted, introverted, okay? So we know that. But how do we know if it's intuition or sensing first? Because we need to fill in, a person needs to have these two functions, which are the perceiving functions. Because you perceive the world either through the material world of sensing, of sensory things, of the material present, and we need to be able to deal with abstract conceptual ideas that do not exist concretely in this world. So the ENFJ has N in the code, so intuition will come first. So that's why it becomes intuition and sensing. So there we are. There we have the 4-function model, the 4-function, the cognitive function stack of the ENFJ is extroverted feeling, introverted intuition, extroverted sensing, introverted thinking. FE, NI, SE, TI. Right? So you see that these alternate. You see that all 4 of these are here. These 2 are opposites and these 2 are opposites. That's how it works also for this type, the INFP. Is that here, in this case, it's introverted, extroverted, right? Instead of extroverted, first. So it's the same, except that introverted is first. And all 4 of these still exist, but they can exist in other combinations. But the first and the fourth have to be different, and these 2 have to be different as well on this scale, intuition, sensing, thinking, feeling. So there's these scales so these 2 have to be opposite on these scales, and these 2 have to be opposites on these scales. Now I've only shown you 2 types that have feeling as their first function, but you could do the same with thinking. I'll draw another one down here, I guess, later on, but this is enough for going for now. So the INFP has, things get more complicated with introverts because basically the INFP is a perceiver, right? So shouldn't their first function be a perceiving function? Intuition or sensing? Well, no, because things are just complicated, and basically introverts are defined by their second function because they don't lead with an extroverted function, otherwise they'd be extroverts. So they lead with an introverted function that is not perceiving the world outside, really. So, or they're not really, like their first function is kind of their hidden function, their secret function, that defines their entire life, but that people on the outside won't see. So, for the INFP, the first extroversion, the first extroverted function, basically the second function, because it has to be extroverted, is the second one in an introverted type, has to be a perceiving function, because the INFP, right? P is perceiving, so it would be the intuition in this case, because INFP, because intuition is preferred over sensing. So while in extroverted types you start with the first and the last, and then you fill in the middle, here in this case it's more complicated. Often you have to start with the second function first, that is extroverted intuition. So the first perceiving function in the INFP is extroverted, and it's any extroverted intuition. Then the opposite of this in the third slot, right? 2 and 3 are always opposites, and 1 and 4 are always opposites. So extroverted intuition, its opposite is introverted sensing. Now we have these two that are opposite. Then we can add the other two, which are obviously thinking and feeling have to be there. And for the INFP, the F is first, right? The code is F, so the primary function, the dominant driver function, will be introverted, right? Because it's an introverted type, and feeling, because it's F. And here, extroverted thinking is the last, right? Opposites as well. So these two are opposites, these two are opposites, introverted, extroverted, introverted, extroverted. And it is more complicated figuring out the stack of an introvert, because it doesn't make much sense in the what's perceiving, what's judging. So in the INFP, it's judging, perceiving, judging. In the ENFJ, it's perceiving, it's judging, perceiving, judging as well. But it makes no sense, right? But it's just because it's this weird thing with the introverted types have their first function has to be an introverted function. And so the code is kind of misleading, right? Because the INFP's first function is actually a judging function. It's just that it's introverted, so the world doesn't see it. The world sees an INFP as a pretty open-minded, not very organized person, and they don't see that actually INFPs can be pretty, want things pretty close-ended. But that's where we come into a way more complex MBTI. So here we've got the MBTI as I understand it, how you get to your cognitive function stack. Now, I am going to go a little bit more into detail about these functions and what they mean. So we're going to try to make this video a little bit speeded up. The extrovert functions are often more easy to understand because people see it from the outside more. So extroverted intuition is basically abstract concepts from the outside, and it's kind of branching out into the outside, how you jump from point to point and grab all of these ideas and connect all of these ideas into like some kind of firework. That's kind of the pattern of extroverted functions is pa, while introverted is like goes in, So extroverted intuition is kind of bouncing, brainstorming out ideas, right? While introverted intuition is synthesizing all of these ideas into one point. So that's where all of this idea of being able to having a good intuition of what is the right answer in the end. Where is this all leading to? And this is very conceptual and not very grounded in the outside world, right? Because it's not a sensing function, it's an intuition function. And it is going through, sifting through, getting to the synthesis, an amalgamation of all these things into one, rather than extroverted intuition that is more from one point, 1,000 points. Here it's 1,000 points into one point. Seeing the patterns of introverted intuition is the core of introverted intuition. When we come to sensing, extroverted sensing is the outside world, the things that you can touch, the things that you can see, how your body is in relation to the world, the material facts of the world. A lot of extroverted sensing dominants are really into sports, the arts, these concrete objects. Introverted sensing is way more about bodily sensations, this kind of homeostasis, the sensing on the inside, this regularity of things, the way that you can keep your body, kind of like the self-care stuff is very SI and regulating in the body. It can also manifest itself into wanting to know a lot of facts about the world that are kind of anchored in the traditions around you. So there's that. And then we've got the extroverted feeling, which is feeling is like wanting harmony across people, groups, social gatherings, making decisions based on what would be beneficial for the group, on a cultural level, you could say, on a social level, making value-based decisions that would lead for the good of all, and so that's where a lot of empathy comes from and such, compassion, but so that is extroverted feeling. It's feeling that is directed towards the outside, not necessarily your own feelings. While introverted feeling is more about the internal compass, moral compass of the person. It's more about reflecting on emotions, but also on, how do these things make me feel? What is important to me, not what is important to others, which is more an extroverted feeling. Here it's what is important to me. So that's where the authenticity of introverted feeling is felt, while the extroverted feeling is more about peace and generosity and love in the world, while the introverted feeling is more like what feels right to me. Now we've got thinking and so extroverted thinking is implementing solutions, pretty much. It's a lot about what works, what is effective, how can our logic and thinking impact the outside world, how can we make this process as as efficient as possible, work for the biggest amount of people. How can we organize the world according to how the facts are? While introverted thinking is how do I make a logic that works in my mind, a framework that I can use. I do not use introverted thinking, so I have a hard time understanding this one because I use introverted feeling. So yeah, but from what I can understand, it's like an internal framework of what is true, what is logically true. Extroverted thinking is a bit less interested in what is true, what is true for the individual, like who has logically come up to this point. It's more like, well, what works, Introverted thinking is a little bit more what is true. And so that's where it goes inward. It's not going to be true. What's going to be true for one person is not going to be true for another person, right? So that's how, that's the simple description of these 8 functions. Now, there is all of this discussion about what all these functions do and how are you supposed to develop the functions that are less developed? Are you supposed to develop the functions that you don't even have in the 4 function stack because you have 4 other ones that lie here? That is on another level of complication that we're not going to get into today. But what you need to know about the function stack is that you go from the code, you create the stack. Once you have the stack, you see that what is the dominant, what is the inferior function. So dominant, auxiliary or co-pilot, tertiary or the teenage kid in the backseat, and the inferior function, which is the baby. And for an INFP, introverted feeling, which is the moral compass, the thinking about what I feel is true, or what I feel is good to me, what do I like, is the driver in the INFP's life, while the extroverted thinking, the inferior baby, is extroverted thinking, which is wanting to implement things in the world regardless of what people are feeling, and so that creates this kind of dichotomy, and every type has their kryptonite or whatever in their inferior function, the baby function, that is kind of ridiculous at times, but we need it, but we can't rely on it because it is not reliable like the dominant function. But we wouldn't throw out the baby. That would be mean. So we can't do that. We have to have the baby in the car seat, but sometimes the baby is disruptive. So we need to be able to take care of the baby while at the same time getting ourselves to the destination through our functions. So, and the INFP, I didn't talk about the auxiliary and the tertiary. They have extroverted intuition as their secondary function, their co-pilot. So they like feeling a lot, about their own emotions and stuff. But they also they also need to have some extroversion in the world. So they like thinking about all sorts of ideas in the outside world, a lot of abstract ideas about the world, and coming up with a lot of ideas out of one idea. So that makes things quite exciting for an INFP to talk about a lot of concepts. So that's where the extroverted intuition comes in handy. Brings us out of just thinking about ourselves all the time, right? And then we've got introverted sensing, the tertiary function, the number 3, which is kind of there to counterbalance everything. So they're there to, because you need to have a sensing function. So they're not the worst. INFPs are not the worst at introverted sensing, but they are not the best at it either. So they have introverted sensing, which is their teenage function, right? It's not super developed, but it's not a baby anymore, you know? So the introverted sensing leads to INFPs liking their creature comforts, the stuff that makes their body feel regulated. They like a lot of, they are often nostalgic for a lot of memories because that brings back this idea of regularity, of tradition, of their loved ones. And so the introverted sensing also is helpful for their, their memory of things that are important to them, right? So it all leads back to the introvert feeling, basically. The others are in service of the introverted feeling. So the extroverted intuition gives the introverted feeling ideas to think about and to incorporate into their moral compass. The introverted sensing gives them memories to figure out what is good and bad from the introverted feeling. And extroverted thinking is a way to implement all of these ideas that have been cooking in their head from the introverted feeling all the time. So yeah, that is the cognitive function stack and introduction to MBTI. I'm sorry that this is very long and that I have a hard time explaining things, but I hope that this is some kind of introduction for you guys who are new to this channel or who are new to MBTI in any way. I usually don't talk much about MBTI theory. I usually talk about my own experience, but I feel like a lot of people have come to my channel and don't know anything about MBTI, and I'd like to help out with that. So yeah, tell me in the comments if you have any questions about MBTI that I could answer. I will do my best to respond in a quick fashion, and I hope that you guys have a great day. Bye.